distinguished guests and friends. I am Manish Srivastava. I'm Associate Director with the Earth Science and Climate Change Division at TERI, and it is my privilege to welcome you all to this evening where we are initiating a lecture come discussion series in collaboration with India Habitat Center. It's going to be a monthly series, and the first session is focusing on the topic called the Climate Conundrum, Global Geopolitics and Missed Opportunities. As you all know, the Bonn session has just started a couple of hours back, and where all these issues are going to unfold in next 2 weeks. So it's our own version of engaging with those issues. We have a very illustrious list of speakers today to discuss these various aspects that the global geopolitics is throwing at us and the future of climate cooperation and climate action. So let me invite on stage Professor K.G. Suresh, Director IHC, our co-host for this series, and whose generosity has allowed us to plan a year-long engagement. My senior colleague, Ms. Suruchi Bhadwal, Program Director, Climate and Air at TERI. Ms. Leena Nandan, Distinguished Fellow, TERI, and former Secretary, Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change. Ms. Carly Partridge, Minister Counsellor, Australian High Commission. They have a difficult task of negotiating, dealing with these difficult conversations at the upcoming COP. We also have Dr. Acquino Vimal, Joint Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs, and our mentor, Mr. Ajay Shankar, Distinguished Fellow, TERI. Sir, if you could please come and join on the stage. We have limited time, so I won't take much of your time and directly go to welcome address by, it's a recorded message from Dr. Vivadavan, Director General TERI. Can we have the message, please?
As a prominent institutional member of India Habitat Center, TERI, the Energy and Resources Institute, is pleased to announce the launch of TERI-IHC Lecture Series, a monthly platform for informed and engaging public conversations on sustainability, climate change, environment, energy, agriculture, and other developmental issues. Through this initiative, we hope to connect research, policy, and society while increasing awareness on issues that deeply impact our economy, ecology, biodiversity, and collective future. Every month, eminent researchers, policymakers, industry leaders, and practitioners will come together to discuss critical themes such as climate geopolitics, decentralized energy transition, agri-photovoltaics, and the future of farming. Mission Life and India's net zero pathways, clean air and airshed management, and green innovations for agriculture are some other issues that we will be discussing. We sincerely hope that this lecture series will bring together like-minded people who care deeply for our planet Earth and are committed to improving the well-being of our society. We warmly invite all of you to join these conversations, share your perspectives, and become part of a collective journey towards a more sustainable and resilient future. Thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you.
Thank you. May I now invite Professor K.G. Suresh. He's a distinguished media leader, journalist, and academician, recipient of Ganesh Shankar Vidyarthi Award. He's a jury member of many national awards, including National Film Awards, Ramnath Goenka Awards, and Ladli Media Awards. He has been Vice Chancellor of Makhanlal Chaturvedi National University of Journalism and Communication, Bhopal, and Director General of Indian Institute of Mass Communication. His introduction is very long, so I will stop here, and the floor is yours, sir. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. A very good evening to all of you, and a very special thanks to all my esteemed fellow panelists. I'm not a specialist in climate change, so I would leave the topic to the experts who are present here. But I'm a student of communication, and I think that nothing works without communication. We are here to communicate. We are here to disseminate. We are here to listen and adopt whatever is possible at our own end. So friends, just let me give you a very brief introduction to how it all started. Over the last 1 year, we have been trying to engage with different sectors, and we thought that habitat is not just a place for eating out. Habitat is not just a banquet hall. Habitat has an identity beyond this. Habitat is not just a cultural space, but also an intellectual space. And as such, we thought that habitat should be, and we looked at the mandate of the institution, and it very clearly states that, particularly in habitat-related areas, whether it is environment, sustainability, we have to play a very proactive role of that of a think tank, so to say. And one reason perhaps that it was not taken forward was that we do not necessarily have the expertise for that. But this is the era of collaborations. So we may not have expertise in every aspect of life, but we certainly have great collaborators. So we started entering into a lot of collaborations over the last 1 year. In the cultural space, in the philosophical space, we got into an arrangement with the Indian Council of Philosophical Research. So we had, including on nature, there were sessions. So they were connected to habitat also in one way or the other. So last talk was on Buddhism and environment. So we tried to connect. The second, we got into a tie-up with Heal Foundation for promoting health-related issues, because health is an integral part of habitat. So we had discussions on aspects like blue zones, areas where people live for more than 100 years. So we had discussions on that. We got into a tie-up, a monthly discussion series with Prayas. And there we are discussing about issues related to the city, rehabilitation, street children, skills, because that's also part of habitat. We got into a collaboration with National Stock Exchange because financial literacy is very important today. So we got into that. And then we thought that we should have a dedicated series on environment, on sustainability, on all these issues. How do we go about it? We have institutional arrangements with India Foundation, RIS, to talk about, external affairs, international relations, but specifically environment related, because that's a very critical part of our lives, of our habitat. How do we take it forward? And that is when it crossed our mind that one of the most prominent institutions working in that domain is part of our family, the TERI. And the Honorable Director General is a member of our Governing Council. So we requested her that can we go in for a collaboration for a monthly series? And she was gracious enough to accept that. Of course, we used to have earlier also, Mr. Ajay Shankar's book was discussed here, in collaboration with TERI only. But we thought, let's institutionalize it, and we are confident that this series, This is the first session of the series, but this is going to be, we are going to do a lot of experiment. We wanted to launch it on 5th of June, which is the World Environment Day. But unfortunately, that day, I think that we could not tie up the whole thing. But well, we do celebrate events even a day or two or within a week. So I think that this is to coincide with the World Environment Day, and I'm really happy that this has finally taken shape. And I'm really grateful to each one of you for coming here, for supporting this. I can only assure you that we will ensure that the best possible discussions are organized. We get international and national speakers, academicians, experts from the domain, and we want to involve not just the policymakers and the practitioners, but also the stakeholders. So it may go into the bigger auditorium if required, or to the amphitheater where required. This is not going to be confined to just the Gulmohar Hall. We want to take it forward. There could be exhibitions as an extension of this. There could be demonstrations so we were just looking at the paintings which were by the children. So I said that why don't we call those children? We have an interactive sessions with those children who have painted these beautiful, images. So a lot of things can happen, but I'm sure that, your constant support would be there, and I'm really grateful once again to TERI for making this happen. This is going to be, I'm sure, a monthly fixture in the calendar of every environment lover to be here, so that how we can contribute. We do expect governments to do a lot. We do expect private sector to do a lot. But how we as citizens too can contribute to, improving our environment, to reducing the carbon footprint. I think that these issues would also be discussed in this platform. On that note, thank you once again.
Thank you, Professor Suresh. I now invite my colleague Suruchi to give us an overview of why this topic is important today. Suruchi has been an IPCC author on Working Group 2 and a leading researcher in Authority on Adaptation Policy. So we are in good hands. Suruchi, over to you.
Thank you, Manish. So the environment is part of the habitat, and as humans, we are constantly interacting with it. I think I take back those words from the previous opening that we just had. We chose this particular topic because we did think that this is something that deserves attention and a discussion, and we thought it would be interesting to start our first lecture series with a focus on the climate. Thank you all for joining us here today for this lecture series. And of course, it's an opportunity for all of us to share our thoughts and see where we can head from the discussions we have on this particular topic, which is apparently, it is interesting and of course concerns each one of us as citizens. So the first lecture series here focuses on the current global challenges, and why I'm talking about it as a collective is because the climate also is a global challenge, as well as the current geopolitics that we are basically dealing with or observing around us also has to do with something that's happening around us. And therefore, the world experiences that are being gathered from the challenges that we face of today to be able to see what we can do and the way we can address it and move forward. The outline is basically very simple. The PPT is structured around a global issue of prominence for decades now. So the climate crisis is not something that has emerged of today or is of a yesteryear kind of an issue. It has been there for decades now, and therefore, we basically need to see that what are the issues that have been there, and how is it that we are basically looking at it as a global issue to be able to deal with it collectively, because we do need collective action and movement around this particular area. The current global status quo with regards to the global geopolitics and the emerging situations, and the agenda that needs to be charted out to take the way forward. So moving on, basically to set the context, with regards to the way the temperatures have been increasing, we are all familiar, and most of us would have seen these slides around. I'm not sure how familiar are people with the topic. Global average temperatures have continued to increase in the past, and along with it, the associated impacts which we talk about, with changes in rainfall patterns, changes in extreme events, so heat wave conditions, floods, droughts, conditions of heavy precipitation that are emerging in different parts of the world. It's just not India, it's all countries in the world are grappling with the situation and are exposed to one or the other form of risk, and we have been seeing it in the past. Of course, this continues in the future. There are ways by which scientists kind of try and understand how these changes are going to emerge over the next coming decades, leading us to the 21st century. And we see that temperatures are likely to continue to increase over the higher side. We are headed towards a 2-degree and above rise until the 21st century, given the various measures that we have seen that countries have put forward with regards to the ambitions that they have in terms of taking effective climate action. So this is where we stand globally and where the issues basically stand. It is a crisis at hand, not for today, but also for the future and generations to come. It's not a problem contained in one part of the world. The whole world is involved in this and shall get impacted. So it's not just an India story or a US story or a Europe story. I think every country out there is exposed to the consequences of climate change and will be affected because of the changes we are talking about. Of course, the severity of it may vary from country to country. And a large part of it depends on the abilities and capacities of countries to be able to respond to these risks that we are talking about. So how well are countries structured, their institutional capacities, etc., financial abilities, etc., to be able to respond to these challenges that we are talking about with regards to the changes that are likely to be observed. Nearly half the world's population is vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Statistics show that 3.6 billion people are likely to be affected by the consequences of climate change. Ambition levels for the Paris Agreement and achievements for a net zero even fall short for a 2-degree mark as of today. So these are ambition levels with regards to policies and measures that different countries in the world have put on the table. So current policies and measures take us way down, but not to the levels that we want to reach for a 1.5-degree world or a 2-degree world, if I were to say. So we fall way short of it. The net zero commitments that countries have given also fall short of the 2-degree mark. So we need greater climate ambition, and that's very clear if we want to address this particular issue in a particular manner. So ideally, those are the challenges that basically we face. This is a slide on adaptation finance, but to drive home the fact that finance has always been limited to be able to help us with the problems that we face, and therefore we have the same challenges as of today, where the finance is going to be limited. We do not have enough resources for the kind of climate action we are talking about that is needed by the world today. Forget developing countries or least developed countries. All countries need the finance, all countries need the technology, all countries need the capacities, and at the end of the day, we want to see the solutions moving forward. So that is where the challenges lie with regards to implementation and the will and the wish and will to be able to do something about it. Now, where do we stand in the current situation? We know things are not good, the commitment levels are low, but what do we see in 2026 emerging is the changing geopolitical landscape that we see around us. Global geopolitical landscape and the turn it has taken speaks about a far more fragmented world than before. And therefore, the shift from current affairs and what needs to be done on other issues or global impending issues that are there has happened from sustainability, say, for example, talking about sustainability, to other issues. The shift is from unipolar, hyper-globalized world to a multipolar order driven by power and insecurities. Core elements of the current world today are defined by conflicts, focus on militarization, race for technology, AI, quantum computing, semiconductors, reduced external dependency, and the role of the global south. So we are seeing a world which is far more different than what we have been used to. and of course, the challenges with regards to other issues that need to be dealt with and addressed. Uh, this is evident in the race of acquiring rare minerals, earth, sovereign control over data, and in the end, leaving room open for the positioning of different groups, for instance, the BRICS. And there could be other groups also, and multilateral processes, forums that we are talking about. There are challenges we know that have emerged at the local level. For India, it's been a story of treading a path, possibly much difficult, where we are trying to focus on choices on multi-alignment, and the objective is to secure its own grounds. So those are the challenges we face. Internally, we face other kinds of challenges which are related to the price of crude oil and the multi-year highs that we have seen worldwide. In India, also, the same story gets replicated. So just to, conclude, basically driving home the fact that while we see all these things happening around us, we also see then decisions being taken where other issues take a backseat. The climate takes a backseat to be addressed, because we can see the signals of it already, not because of what is happening in 2026. The US had already pulled out of it. We have Canada, which shows weak alignment. And the recent St. Petersburg Economic International Forum that was held clearly lays out a path for multilateral focus on different issues and the way that this needs to be debated and handled. So, of course, we are left with questions with regards to what is in store for climate action? Are we losing out on time for the decisions we need to make? And collectively as a world, what can we do to basically push the environmental agenda forward and the climate crisis forward? Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Suruchi. Now we move to the second phase of today's evening. It's a panel discussion, and we have a very illustrious participants in that discussion today. Ms. Carly Partridge is a long-serving diplomat with the experience in Pacific before taking up the role as Minister Counsellor in New Delhi. Dr. Acquino Vimal, he has been part of Indian leadership in Embassy of India in Beijing, China, and permanent mission of India to the United Nations in New York. He was also ambassador of India to the Kingdom of Norway, and currently oversees India's engagement and diplomatic policies regarding the economic and social branches of the United Nations. With Mr. Ajay Shankar, we have access to a rich and varied experience in public service, which span for more than 45 years or so. Most importantly, in the context of today's topic, it's pertinent to recall that during the global economic crisis of 2008, he was instrumental in putting together the stimulus package, which helped Indian economy to recover in short time. So we have our panelists with rich experience in global negotiations, and also somebody who has deep experience in navigating India domestically in the context of very complex international circumstances. And to facilitate this discussion, we have Leena Nandan ma'am, who led India in climate negotiations in the capacity of Secretary MoEFCC. So now, Leena ma'am, over to you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think the tipping point that we are at could not have been captured more vividly than the paintings by the children that you saw outside. What is the despair that is etched, the challenge that it poses to us, the question that it asks of each one of us? Is this the legacy that we want to leave behind for the world? We are guardians of the planet. What is it that we are doing for future generations? I think that is a question that should occupy all our minds. And as far as the topic is concerned, the climate conundrum and the geopolitics, nature knows no boundaries. These are artificial constructs, and it is because of these artificial constructs, because all of us are working in the environment of our own countries, our own geographical boundaries, looking to our own interests. Therefore, the issue of public good, of global good, somewhere has got completely relegated to the background. So what is it that we need to do? How can we sound the wake-up call loud enough for all those who need to take action to actually swing into action without any delay? And that is the subject of today's discussion. And as Professor Suresh put it so eloquently, I'm so happy that this discussion is happening in Habitat Center, because this is the center for cultural and intellectual discourse. And I'm sure that the kind of thoughts that it will leave all of us with, that is going to guide many decisions that will be taken not just in India, but across the world, because of the very distinguished panelists we have today, who will no doubt play a very important role in shaping the things as they are to come. And we must always, when we recognize the problem, we must always have a sense of hope and of optimism that there is indeed going to be change, because the power of change lies with each one of us. And it is at these forums, when we discuss, debate, and awaken to the realities of today and the challenges of tomorrow, that new beginnings will be started. So, without further ado, let me address my question to the lady in the hot seat, Ms. Partridge, because your country is heading towards COP this year, and you are organizing it jointly with Turkey. Not an easy task. So let us hear from you how you propose to go about all the activities associated with the COP. What is your action plan?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor, and it's wonderful to share this opportunity with so many distinguished colleagues, many of whom are greater climate experts than I. I wanted to start perhaps by talking about the geopolitical element here. And climate change urgency was so beautifully articulated in those slides that you showed. Recent events, of course, have focused us very intensely on energy security. We've been talking about broader economic security for quite some time, and the geopolitics, the skill in bringing all of those things together in a way that isn't zero-sum, and that we can leverage all of those different domestic and global needs and aspirations. It requires some cleverness, it requires some skill, and I hope very much that Australia, as President of Negotiations, can help to wend a tricky path that acknowledges all of those very live concerns and geopolitical realities as we work together to resolve this difficult issue of climate change. I was going to talk perhaps about qualities and characteristics of our presidency, and then priorities, and then perhaps a little bit about how important we think India is, given where I am. And it says something very clear, I think, that a lot of people have come out on a Monday night to talk about this issue. I mean, that's very evident in the audience today. Qualities and characteristics. I think where I would like to start is, we've already had an interesting start. We needed to negotiate with Turkey what would our respective roles be in an unprecedented fashion. And we have succeeded in doing that. We will have Turkey host the COP, and we will be the President of Negotiations, and we will have an important pre-COP program. And as part of that program, one of our commitments was to lift the voices of our Pacific Island country colleagues and counterparts. Fiji and Tuvalu will both host a pre-COP series of events in the lead up to COP in Turkey. And for those of you, Fiji would be very well known to you. There's a very significant Indian diaspora in Fiji, of course, but Tuvalu, for those who don't know, is an extremely small island state and deeply climate affected. And so it's an opportunity for Oceania as a region to demonstrate what this issue looks like very concretely and very practically for small island states and for ocean-based states. Another characteristic that's really important to us is to build trust. We've seen examples of where these sorts of international fora don't succeed when trust is lacking. And it's a very easy thing to say and a very difficult thing to do. But we think it's really important. I think you said, sir, at the beginning, we are here to communicate. That is really the sentiment that Australia would like to bring. Listen, find common ground, understand, look for solutions, trust and respect. That is the characteristics and qualities that we wish to bring to our presidency. In terms of priorities, thematic priorities, there are 4 key objectives for COP31 as Australia sees it: accelerating the global clean energy transition, mobilising finance and investment, growing the global green industry, and, as I mentioned, elevating Pacific priorities. And that includes keeping within 1.5 degrees and within reach and access to climate finance. Now let me segue to where we see India. High Commissioner Green, High Commissioner for Australia to India, says there is no climate action without India. And he is absolutely right. And we have already experienced really successful and effective bilateral relationships between Australia and India in working towards climate action, in particularly in the field of renewable energy. For example, Australia has the highest number of solar rooftops in the world. 1 in 3 homes in Australia have a solar rooftop. Our solar rooftop deployment is the largest in the world. And we have agreed between our Prime Ministers a renewable energy partnership that takes that very specific expertise and scales it to the sort of vision that Prime Minister Modi is envisioning in India, and combining our skills to see that vision realised. We are also doing a lot of close work on shared challenges with critical minerals. We talked about tech, we talked about other aspects of geopolitics at the moment. And we've had an incredible amount of success in working together bilaterally between Australia and India. And we see the huge lift and the huge numbers, the volume of work that India is putting into its energy transition is quite extraordinary, particularly for a country the size of mine, 26 million people. The scale here is enormous and incredible, and the innovation is amazing. So how do I bring all of those threads together? They seem a little disparate. But it is to listen, to work together, to leverage strengths, and India has many, and to work in partnership as we drive towards this series of what will be some quite confronting and difficult meetings in many ways, together with a spirit of trust and collaboration. And I hope very much Australia can succeed in that ambition. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was really insightful, and I was particularly happy to hear that you're going to focus on climate finance, because that is the elephant in the room that nobody really wants to talk about. I move to Mr. Vimal, and in particular, I think what we would like to hear from you is how India is doing the delicate balancing act. We all saw that recently the International Court of Justice, they had issued an advisory, and that legal opinion was then taken up by the United Nations, and there was a resolution that was passed. India abstained from it, but then it opens up the question of how this delicate tightrope walk is going to be balanced by India. We'd like to hear from you on that.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you to TERI for organizing this. I know it's one of the first of the series which they're doing it. And in a way, a bit of a provocative topic, but I don't know about the audience here. They find it provocative enough. But at least those who are in it find it that this is one of those areas where as the title says, is a missed opportunity. And perhaps it's one of those areas where for decades we feel it's a missed opportunity. So I don't know where we are going to go ahead in the decades to come, whether in another 10 years also we are going to say the same thing or not. But it is definitely a conundrum, no doubt about it. And I must say that whatever progress has happened, it has been very incremental. For some, it is progress because sometimes to bring the world together, it's a challenge. You know, people are from different background. There are different state of economic development. Countries have different priorities. So there's a huge challenge when you sit in the international forum to discuss issues like this. And to reach a common ground is always a problem. And that's perhaps one of the reasons why the climate negotiation has been moving at a glacial pace, perhaps much slower than the climate change itself, I guess. So we need to see whether we can accelerate the pace of these conversations. I would say that perhaps one of the biggest challenge we face in these negotiations are there is an element of sides. Countries are taking sides. When you go into the room, you see there is developed countries, there is developing countries. Then you say there is a like-minded developing countries group. You have the AOCs group. So suddenly you realize that these are actually recognized groups in the climate negotiation, which means that uh, everybody has a legitimate stake in these conversations, and they feel that their stakes are important, uh, which perhaps is a bit of a detriment to the entire concept because you're actually taking sides. Um, while people, purists, and maybe the think tanks would see that there's only one side, that is humanity versus nature. But I think when we sit down in conversations, we realize that we are quite divided in how we approach this issue. And the reason why your question becomes very relevant is that it took a lot of time and discussions, 30 plus years, to actually start a conversation on, yes, there should be grant-based financing. And that happened in Belem. So you can see the progress which happened just to recognize the fact that there has been historical emissions and there is a consequence because of that. And various developed countries have reached a particular state of development by, one can say, polluting the environment. And then as a consequence, others who do have a requirement of development have to wait, or whether they should forego or not. A question for countries like India is that should we fix ourselves in the current state of development, and will that be a solution? Because everybody keeps saying that there is no success in climate change if India doesn't deliver. But then what does that mean? That should we stay at this level of 3,000 per capita income? Is that what the world wants India to do? Or should we aspire for something for our people? That's a democratic call, and that's a government's call, and that's a challenge which we have when we go into these negotiations. Now, where the divide happens, and I think that's where this ICJ becomes more relevant for us, is that there is this push which has been happening for decades that there should be more climate finance, there should be more transfer of technologies, there should be more capacity building. In short, means of implementation. If there is no adequate means of implementation, how do you expect developing countries to at least have certain development, bring progress to the people, but also ensure that they're able to fulfill their commitments to climate? There is always this push that let's be more ambitious, but ambitious for what? That will be the question, because we can be ambitious and we can say anything, and if it doesn't suit me, I don't fulfill that ambition and shift the responsibility to somebody else. If that's the approach, then fine, we can be very ambitious and we not reach anywhere. I guess the frustration builds up. And I think one of the frustration which built up in the small island countries, which resulted in what we are seeing now. They felt that, there's been a lot of talks. We have been talking, and we are sinking. Who's there to help us? I mean, will somebody help us? Or we just sink, and then what do we do with our people? Do we relocate? Do we forgo our culture? We forgo our lands? That's the challenge. I guess this is a calling which has been happening for long. And people are facing this problem that, yes, climate is a big issue, but I don't think we are arrived at moment till now. I don't think this is the moment where it can shake things up, because the advisory opinion is well-intended. The discussion in the General Assembly which ensued earlier this year on this advisory opinion also was well-intended. I don't think people had disagreement on the issues, but perhaps the disagreement remained in the camps, as I started earlier, that we all are divided in how we look at this issue. So one has to balance it. At least for a country like India, it's a very important task for us, because while we are doing a lot when it comes to climate action, perhaps our success stories are something which has been spoken about in the world, but that doesn't solve the problem. We still have a long way to go in India, and believe it or not, a lot of developing countries are actually looking at India, how we are doing this journey. For that, we have to have a very balanced act here. I mean, we can go very aggressive and say, throw everything out and say that, okay, here's ICJ, we are not going to do anything. I mean, then so be it, and let's face the consequence. Or we make sure that we continue the path, we continue our journey in terms of what we are doing, trying to do at our best what we can. But that doesn't mean that we will forego our principles of equity, or whether it's about CBDR, or whether it's about ensuring that the responsibilities the developed countries have fulfill their responsibilities and doing this. But I'll just say that we have actually set a good template for how we are doing things, and we can continue to do this. There is a lot of work which has been happening in India, whether it's in TERI and other think tanks like this, or even in the private sector, or even in the community level. There is considerable amount of work. Of course, most of these are not captured, and there has been, of course, something which can be easily scaled or replicated in other parts of the world. But that's the journey which we have to do. We have to work on. And if we divide and separate the climate conversation from the developmental conversation, I can rest assured we will fail. We have to integrate it as part of it. Development has to be green. Development has to be in a sustainable manner. Development has to be in a resilient manner. And if it requires capital, well, so be it. One has to do it. And if capital has to be made in a manner which suits the current way the capital is operated, well, so be it. I mean, I'll just stop with one last point here, is that when you sit through different conversations and move from one room to another, you realize that the same conversation gets completely diluted and then gets into a different realm. To start is, if you're sitting in the COP negotiations and listening to what's happening, what I mentioned is the conversation. There are groups divided and everybody making their points, and everybody sticking to their points, and there is glacial progress on various grounds. But you shift that and come to a think tank conversation. Now there everybody is very aspirational, and when one gets into a very emotional state of affairs and how things have to be done, and of course you get a lot of cliches and good statements, very emotionally strong statements, which is very nice. It kind of evokes emotions there. And then you shift gear and move to the finance track. And suddenly you realize that, well, you give the big picture, but then when the conversation happens, they say, where's the money? Where's the profit? Where are my return on investment? And suddenly you realize that climate is not a conversation there. It's actually a climate talk, climate finance conversation, but that's not how they look at it. I mean, that emotion and that big picture is fine, that you keep it aside. But if you're talking about money, we have to talk on return on investments. We don't talk on where I get my, ensure my, how I go back to my board and how I go back to my investors to say that this money is value for money. So that's the current reality. So we have to accept that current reality and see how we can move forward in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was a masterclass in diplomacy. So we've also got a bird's eye view about the fine art of negotiation. I will now move to Mr. Ajay Shankar and ask him about how, with the current level of renewable energy adoption that we see in our country, what is the trajectory that he envisages? Because that is really the crux of the transition that India and the world needs.
I'll pick up the conversation from your last comment about how there are different conversations that take place. Now, the renewable energy transition of India, the success we have achieved is far, far beyond what we had hoped for. So, to give a sense, when the National Solar Mission began, the price was more than 4 times the price of electricity in the market. And the target announced was over 20,000 megawatts by 2022. Now, this is an amazing success story because all the solar power capacity that we have created, it's 150,000 megawatts now. And last year we added 40,000 megawatts. And all of it has come through private investment, through competitive private investment. And all the private firms have had no difficulty in raising money. And why did they have no difficulty in raising money? Because Indian policy was creative enough in de-risking investment. And de-risking investment by assuring price, which would give returns on investment, and assuring offtake for the entire life of the project. So if I look at the rest of the world, the greatest failure has been, I would call, of political leadership, because of the faith in the pricing signal of a carbon price and in the inability of the state to assume direct leadership. Where the state has assumed direct leadership, the results are amazing. So the whole world owes Germany a great debt of gratitude for triggering the solar power revolution in the world. They gave a feed-in tariff of 50 euro cents a unit. They spent a few $100 billion. The solar power industry in China took off. The whole world is a beneficiary of cheap production. But we have not been seeing decisive political leadership in the advanced countries in the field of climate change. And here the politics, in my view, is primarily about being in power and giving your voters what they want. But responsible political leadership is to persuade voters to want what they should want. So for me, the real test of a statesman leader is how far he succeeds in persuading his people to do what is right for them and future generations. And here I see a colossal failure in the West. I mean, if you see France and UK passed legislation of net zero by 2050, in action there is a retreat. The US has taken the extreme position that climate science is a hoax. So, on the one hand, there is this failure of leadership, and on the other hand, the market and technology have delivered wonders. So, in India, we have reached a stage where our solar power is the cheapest in the world. Solar plus storage is cheaper than new thermal. And we have demonstrated that if you take care of the business risk, you can get all the investment we want. So what we have achieved in India is actually quite a good role model for the rest of the world as far as the developing countries are concerned. But in terms of the international community, I'm afraid that unless the political leadership of the major emitting centers, United States, Europe, and China, show leadership, we will not easily see the kind of action we need. Last 5-10 years have been very disappointing. And the climate conundrum is essentially also a political conundrum. In economics, they keep saying that any trade or whatever, there are winners and losers. So if the world has to get to net zero, the use of fossil fuels has to end. Then all those who make money out of fossil fuels, either as firms or as countries, have this very difficult future to look at, which is the fossil fuel industry has to go and money from it has to go. And that's a tension we see everywhere. I mean, in your country, I'm sure it's there. And it's there in the United States and everywhere else. But a strategic vision, and I think Australia is already demonstrating that you can transition to another economy which is green and also very profitable and productive. And I think the United States is best placed there, but not moving. China is very well placed there. It can achieve net zero faster than anybody else because they have deep pockets and the technology. So I will again end by saying the challenge is to create the public opinion in countries which gets their political leaders to move in the right direction. And here, India has a very good example because we have a prime minister who's displayed extraordinary climate leadership and he keeps pushing the envelope. And as somebody who's been around for a long time, he has always been ahead of the curve in terms of his policy establishment. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was very interesting to hear how we have ramped up our share of renewable energy so in such a short period, and that is because of a lot of policies that we've put together. Now there are 3 questions, very short questions and trick questions for each of the panelists. So to Ms. Partridge, I would like to ask, Mr. Shankar just talked about responsible political leadership. How will you use your joint presidency of the upcoming COP to try and nudge responsible political leadership among the participating countries?
It's a very good question. And I suppose there's a couple of ways to answer it. And I'll be quick because you've said it's a rapid fire. So the first answer, I suppose, is to demonstrate good leadership ourselves. We are a fossil fuel exporting country. I am not going to resile from that reality. You would think I was very foolish if I tried. But we are a country that is earnestly endeavouring to shift ourselves and make our own energy transition in our own backyard. So I think, first of all, there is a credibility answer to the question, which is, what am I doing in my own backyard? What is my commitment, in our case, to Oceania and to our Pacific Island states? So that's one answer. And two, I think we have learned from watching other COPs, which have been good, bad, and indifferent over the years, and depending on how you look at them, about what works and what doesn't work. And what works best is earnestly trying to appreciate where your partners are coming from. And this was very well spelled out by my colleague here, the Joint Secretary, about all of the various and complex factors that are in play for a country like India that wants to reach Viksit Bharat by 2047, which is a very different set of circumstances to another. But I suppose what I would say is, we need to make sure that we are coming to all of these conversations as the president of negotiations, having done our homework and deeply understanding the perspective of the countries that we're talking to, and not starting later or further downstream than that country is prepared to discuss, and coming and meeting people where they're at and having that trust and collaboration. So 2 answers: walk your talk, or at least show that you're trying, and 2, be a good listener and reflect back at people what they're trying earnestly to tell you about their individual circumstances.
Thank you to Mr. Vimal. Would you think that this BRICS presidency offers us an opportunity to bring the major developing powers onto the larger discussion of missed opportunities, so that we are able to suggest a credible way forward on climate change action?
Well, I mean, BRICS may not be the right forum, I would say, because as I mentioned, there are already so many groups. You want to create one more, I mean, it's okay. Most of them in the BRICS are part of the like-minded developing countries group, which has a common position when it comes to climate negotiations in COP. I mean, I don't think there is a dearth of platform. There's enough platform globally, where you want to talk about climate and conclude by talking about climate and not do anything. I think what is required now is, do we have platforms to actually take climate action? And how do we do it? I mean, how serious are we in our conversations and talks? I mean, I sometimes, when I come for these, I feel, we have spoken enough on this. I mean, it's not, okay, if there's a new audience who doesn't understand climate, maybe they find it interesting to hear all this. But if somebody who has been listening to this, they know this. I mean, this has been happening for decades. So, I mean, if you are following this track for years, then this is something which I can assure you that if you had heard some panelists 10 years ago, they would have spoken the same thing. So it's not new. Perhaps we need to change gears to look at what is that we are missing. And it's not the missed opportunity part. What we are actually missing in what we are doing is basically the climate action part. In fact, we should have serious conversations on, like Sir has mentioned about solar, right? Now, what was the policy and why similar policy cannot be done in other aspects? What are that? Can we have a more serious conversations on what are the mitigation solutions? What are the adaptation solutions? How do we do the finance part? What are the solutions of finance which will work? I mean, all this have the government component, which is where you come with a grant financing, where you give a risk finance, or where you come with an insurance, or where the government can come with its own financing, and where the so-called 9-1 conversation can also move forward. I mean, there are areas where things cannot move forward if there is no grant-based financing. That's fine. I can assure you that taking the solar example, taking the CFL example, taking other examples which we have showed and we have scaled, it's all business. You can actually find business solutions which will work. And that's where the conversation needs to move. I mean, these panels, TERI and others, should take a lead on getting into these specifics. I mean, talking about carbon credit and, okay, what is it that will work? We need to have an honest conversation on that. I mean, general geopolitics, I think they will take care. I think the COP has enough people to work on the general geopolitics of it. They will assure you there's enough excitement for you there, and will give you enough jargons at the end of the day. We came out of Balaam with a lot of aspirations, like, okay, 9-1, mitigation work plan, global goal on adaptation. There's a lot of things. So it's not that we don't have enough which happens in COP. But I think let's be serious about, as think tanks and as institutions and as people who are actually meaning to do what they want to do, get into the specifics of climate action. And I think, Terry and ma'am, I mean, with your experience, I mean, you can actually lead this. And I can tell you that a lot of countries in the global south will actually look at us and see that, okay, this works in India, will work in us, in our country. So we need to actually show that kind of missed opportunity part and then work on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that the point that has come out very clearly is that there has been a lot of talk around COP, but action has been noticeably missing. So hopefully that is where now we will find ourselves moving with focus on action. I would like to ask Mr. Shankar, with his decades of experience in policy making, what does India need to do in terms of changing its structures and systems in the power sector to really make the most of the opportunities that are already there in the renewable energy space?
Personally, I would think that we are not taking enough national pride in what we have achieved. And the way forward is very well set out if we learn the lesson from our solar mission of de-risking private investment. So if we want to enter into green hydrogen economy, be a world leader, get into low carbon or zero carbon production, or become CBAM compliant, it is government policy which has to de-risk private investment for India to reach to the global frontiers. And I am in a minority of one who believes that the CBAM is a very good instrument. It will push the world in the right direction, and I wish other countries would adopt it, because I was just looking at numbers. China's emissions are twice that of Europe and America. What China produces is consumed in Europe and America. CBAM is a way of addressing that distortion. So if the whole world were to adopt CBAM, the transition will move much faster. And I would certainly urge individual countries, which are advanced countries and major importers, to look at imposing CBAM. I mean, I'd be delighted the way CBAM imposed on the US. And within India, we should think seriously of when we will bring that in some form for our own domestic market, in a manner in which we can afford it at that level of development. Because this separation of consumption and per capita emission from production elsewhere is doing nobody any good, even in terms of real analysis of what is going on in the world. So I think we are well set in becoming global leaders in the hydrogen mission. We have to get projects going by de-risking investment in the hydrogen economy, and we'll be on the global frontier. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the point about CBAM was an interesting one. I have personally always thought that CBAM sounds like an intercontinental ballistic missile. And I don't know whether that was really unintended by the parties who are the proponents. But yes, we do need something very, very transformational in the way that we are dealing with climate change as it is. So we have had some very interesting insights from each of our panelists. We can take some 3-4 questions from the group. So if you can just raise your hand and very quickly ask brief questions, so that Shelley and then the gentleman there, but 2 from this side, so we need to balance it out, 1 from here in the middle, and then we can go back to you. So 4 questions. Yeah, Shelley, you can start.
Thank you so much to all the panelists for their insightful. I'm Shelley Kedia from TERI. First question is to Ms. Carly Partridge. How is Australia democratizing climate change in the lead up to COP21? Last year, we did have the Global Ethical Stocktake. And even in past, under Fiji's presidency, we had the Talanoa dialogue, where there was a dialogue between different actors as to where we need to work more strongly. Second thing is, Australia is also a one of the largest coal exporters. Of course, you mentioned that about your coal backyard, but even in international trade, even in India, of course, for a very long time, Australia was its biggest, it's a country. So how do you think it reconciled its role there, of course, quite apart from the domestic issues which you mentioned? Mr. Acquino, Vimal, very quickly for you, you mentioned that climate and development discourse cannot be isolated from each other. The concept of human development in the development space has been around for a very long time. We had an Indian get a Nobel prize in economics for that percent. So why does India not lead the global south in proposals in linking human development to, let's say, climate finance or climate action, as you want to call it, but more importantly, climate commitments, especially when it comes to holding, the global north greater accountable, making them more accountable?
They're good questions. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Oh,
So then we can have the second question from you. Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah, my question is to Ambassador Vimal. Sir, recently Government of India has declined to host the COP33. So are we trying to follow President Trump, the way he quit Paris Agreement? He says climate change is a bogey.
Okay. Yeah. Can you give the mic here? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Madhukar Anand. My question was that in the coming COP, are you proposing any punishment mechanism or compliance mechanism for countries which are not adhering to agreements and undoing climate change?
Okay. Last question.
I just want to find out from whoever can answer this question is that what have we achieved so far after so many COPs from the Paris Agreement till now? What have we achieved, internationally to sort of, fight climate change? What have we achieved so far? And my other question is to Mr. Vimal. Mr. Vimal, what is the government of India thinking about balancing? How are they trying to balance development with, being sort of environmentally friendly and keeping climate change in mind? How are they sort of working on this issue? Because there is this thing which is going on, and that is there are government agencies which are allowing cutting of forests which are already there. Government agencies are allowing cutting of forests. The Andaman Nicobar project, which is very much in the air nowadays, people are discussing it. That's a problem. If you really believe in climate change, you can't have a project like Andaman Nicobar, developing that area. And also, organizations like Greenpeace, they're working on the environment and all that. So they are, have been attacked and things like that.
Right, thank
So
you. I
that's
think
a
we'll take
problem.
the answers now. Thank you. Can you start?
oh, oops, thank you. Thank you, ma'am. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name for the question. Shelley? Shelley. Thank you, Shelley. How do we reconcile it? Of necessity and of policy commitment. So both of those ways. You're right. Australia has traditionally been a fossil fuel exporting economy, but we are in the middle of quite a significant shift. At the moment, we have one of the world's most ambitious nationally determined contributions, and we're on track to reach 82% renewables for electricity generation in Australia by the end of the decade. So is it perfect? No. Are we earnestly seeking to make that transition and making significant progress? Yes. And our geography, as with all of our geographies, is a very important part of that. And I keep coming back to the Pacific, but I hope that's illustrative rather than repetitive. And we are a member of the Pacific Island Forum. The countries that I've spoken about are shared that blue Pacific continent with us. And we feel a deep sense of commitment to making that transition and to do so both as in our domestic policy, but also in our international commitments as well. So it's a journey, but it's a journey that we're on. In terms of, you talked about mechanisms for democratization. I think it's a good question, and I would be very, very interested, perhaps over a cup of tea afterwards, to say, what do you think we should be doing? So there have been a range of mechanisms that have been established. I'd be interested to know what you think works and doesn't. I'd be interested to know what you'd like to see in the pre-COP, because I could read my talking points to you, but I suspect what I'd find more interesting is actually to hear from some people, maybe after the session, what would democracy look like for our presidency from your point of view? I'd be genuinely interested to have that chat with you, Shelley. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Vimal, I think there were a couple of questions to you.
Yeah, I can basically, first of course was COP33. It was basically internal consultation which happened with all stakeholders, and it was decided not to host it. So, I mean, every stakeholder has his own views on how things have to be done, and decision was taken accordingly. On the issue of development, and I think that's what was a common theme of a couple of questions. In India, we have to understand where we are in terms of our development, and every development will have a certain amount of impact on the nature and on the impact on the immediate surrounding. And that's why this whole concept of sustainable development came in. I mean, this is the old concept which came in, and now it's also moving forward in terms of how resilient it is, and how it can be of low emission, or it can be of which is more green in how we do the development. And this is actually coming across in most of the, almost not I would say most, but in all the policies now of all the ministries, because this has become an underlying principle. And we have the National Action Plan, which in fact the Ministry of Environment is the lead, where they are taking a stock of what happens from every development project. In fact, all the projects now, or rather all the development initiatives now have a very strong climate component in it. And that's also part of a long-term low energy development pathway which we are working on. And on the last point, punishment mechanism in the COP31. As I mentioned, anything which happens in COP is a product of consensus. And everything happens, as I said, at a space where you have to bring everybody on board. But I must also tell you that, see, climate, I don't think you can achieve by reward and punishment. I mean, this is not one of those games you play. If you are serious about climate, everybody has to be on the same page, and everybody has to do their bit, however big or small one has to do. And punishment will work, but not to a large extent. I would say that what works is how do we provide solutions, how we provide things which are practical. And not to forget that this is for us what we are doing as a humankind. And as Madam had rightly mentioned, there are no boundaries here. I mean, we have to assume that it will spread and impact everyone equally. I mean, we might face a different kind of environmental challenge, but others might face something else, but it's going to impact. So, I mean, you can argue for a punishment and a strict mechanism, but if people don't do it voluntarily, there is a limit to which we can achieve in this whole journey.
Thank you. Would you like to add something?
Small. This question about what have we achieved in 30 years. Now, if you are a pessimist, then the opening presentation was bleak enough. We are set to cross 3 degrees and so on and so forth. But one can also be an optimist. So I was just looking at numbers in the afternoon. The rate of growth of carbon emissions on the planet has declined quite sharply. If I look at the US itself, their per capita emissions have declined through Trump, Biden, and Trump too. It's on a declining curve. And so if you're an optimist, one would say that we are at the point where the glacier is about to melt and we can see accelerating transition and save the planet. So I would say that the last 30 years have been a waste. All these COP meetings have created the climate, and also technology has moved and private players have moved. So the progress that we have achieved is far below what we needed. But I could be an optimist and feel that we are at the tipping point where the glacier is about to melt and we'll see dramatic changes. Thank you.
That's part of the answer which I made about the development which has to be done in a sustainable manner. And see, I mean, we can take anecdotal case and say that this will result in a whole, dramatic change in the whole government of India or whole India as a context. It's not. Everything has its role. Everything plays its role. And we have to look at in the overall objective of what government has to achieve when it comes to development and its whole objectives. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've had a very interesting discussion, beginning with the presentation that Suruchi made, which really gave the entire picture and the concerns, and the presentations by all the panelists, and the interesting questions asked by all of you. Thank you. I think we are going back richer in knowledge, and as Mr. Shankar said, with a sense of hope that all is not lost yet. Thank you.
So with that, we come to the end of this session. Thank you, everybody, the panelists, the participants, and of the teams both at IHC and TERI for putting this together. We look forward to continuing these discussion series and look forward to all of you joining us again once every month. Thank you.